that's one way of overcoming the fact that we're actually running out of petroleum, and our petroleum use continues to increase, but some estimates say a 50-year supply of petroleum. And then for coal, the estimates are there's a 150-year supply. So no matter what, even with all the greenhouse gas emission problems and whatnot, we still need to come up with some different fuels because we're going to run out of the fossil fuels eventually. And so one alternative to using fossil fuels is something called biomass. And you may wonder what biomass is. Well, it's anything, any kind of matter that's associated with plants, for example, trees, grasses, or crops. It's anything that's, living, but plant matter. For example, trees, now you might think, well, we can just, grow trees and cut them down and burn them, and that would be a renewable source of energy. But the problem with using wood to generate heat energy is the energy output is relatively low compared to the amount of matter that you're burning. And also it's bad for the environment because when you do burn wood, you are producing carbon dioxide, and the fewer trees you have, the less carbon dioxide sinks are naturally available, and it's overall bad for the ecosystem. Another more realistic biomass option is using sugars from grains and allowing that sugar to ferment. And when you ferment sugar, you produce ethanol. So this is glucose, and this is ethanol and carbon dioxide, and that happens with microorganisms. You can use bacteria to, or yeast, excuse me, not bacteria, yeast to ferment your sugars from various trees, grasses, and crops, and use ethanol. And ethanol is a alternative fuel that's used either let me see, it's either used directly as a fuel to burn, or it's mixed with petroleum products. So it's already used widely, and there's something called E85, which is a gasoline that's really 85% ethanol and only 15% petroleum product. And a lot of cars in the US already have been made that can run on this E85. Again, the problem is you get lower gas mileage because you already have one oxygen on the fuel, so there's less of the carbon to undergo oxidation to generate the heat to run the car. So it's lower gas mileage. There's also something called biodiesel, which is different than the ethanol fuel. Biodiesel is actually made from new and used animal and vegetable oils. So rather than being fermented from the sugars, it's from the oils from the plants and animals. And it can be burned either as a pure fuel, because diesel fuel, as you probably know, is oily. It's just got longer alkanes, and so its texture is oily. So you can get the plant and animal oils and crack them down slightly smaller and use them as diesel fuel, or they can be mixed with petroleum products, and they are used in several places. It's just still more expensive than just straight petroleum right now. Another renewable source of energy is to burn garbage, and there's lots of garbage incinerators across the world where people choose to, rather than just put their garbage in a landfill, but rather to burn it, the garbage. And there's a lot of fear that you'll be putting a lot of toxic gases into the environment, but the garbage incinerators are very closely monitored, and they're actually a good use of renewable energy, because we always have garbage. And then finally, I mentioned biogas. And biogas is the methane gas that's collected from animal and plant waste. For example, cow manure. As the bacteria breaks it down, it gives off methane, and then it's can be collected and then used just like natural gas to either heat directly. If a gas stove, a gas furnace, or a gas-powered water heater can be used directly to cook, or it can be used then to generate electricity. And in more rural areas of India and China, biogas is used quite a bit as the energy source for the local villages. Okay, so there are alternatives, but everything requires money and effort and sort of a change up, and we already have major utilities that have been built, and a lot of investment, a lot of money has been invested to, produce electricity the way we normally do. So it takes some investment up front to switch over to, for example, a garbage burning electrical power plant. All right. Finally, obviously, one thing to do is, rather than just continuing to use fuel at the rate we're using, is to conserve fuel. Just use less fuel. Practice conservation. And one way is to recycle more. Part of the reason why there's not is more recycling in the United States is because there's not a huge market for a lot of plastics and paper recycling, but as people demand more recycled products, then there will be more of a market driven to recycle more. But aluminum cans already have been recycled for a very long time, and it's a great way. You can, by recycling aluminum rather than digging aluminum out of the ground and then reducing it to the pure metal, you can save 70% of the energy it would take to get aluminum out of the ground to make a new aluminum can from a recycled aluminum can. So everybody should make an effort to recycle their aluminum cans. Also, we can demand more energy efficient cars. A lot of countries already have way more energy efficient cars mandatory than in the US, and so that's a big political issue because people like their big cars, their comfort, and they don't like to be told what to do in the US, but that is a big way to save money, save fuel. More energy efficient buildings, sometimes these are called smart buildings, where there are sensors throughout the building to know when to turn the lights off, the heat on or off, or the cooling on or off, and that sort of thing. And just by using a computer technology and sensors, the energy savings is huge. And then obviously more public transportation. We don't have a lot of public transportation, especially here in Texas, because everything is so spread out. But as fuel becomes more and more expensive, we'll be moving more and more towards public transportation. So those are just some ways to conserve, and it seems sort of maybe remote, but in our lifetimes, we're going to see the nation moving more towards all of these solutions, as well as alternative fuels, because the regular petroleum and the way we get it is just going to become too expensive for most people.